The new Poco X3 NFC has finally landed, but this smartphone is a far cry from the flagship killer stance that the Xiaomi sub-brand was founded on. At best, you're looking at a mid-range or budget-friendly smartphone, but that doesn't mean it's not worth your time. If you're looking for a great device that doesn't break the bank, this phone may actually be the right device for you. I'm Nick Gray from Phandroid, and in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the pros and cons of the new Poco X3 NFC. Now this video is going to be a quick pros and cons of the Poco X3 NFC after using it for roughly 48 hours now. I do have a full review and camera comparisons between this device and mid-range smartphones that it's going to be going up against, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon as well. But as far as the first pro for this phone, that's going to be the price, and that's the biggest pro really on this list. Starting at €199 for the base model, and that gives you 6 gigabytes of RAM and 64 gigabytes of storage. And when you compare it to the specifications of other mid-range smartphones within the segment, it's honestly going up against devices that are double the cost, or even 2.5 times as much. So when you think about things and you're looking for a smartphone that has a lot to offer without breaking the bank, the €199 price point, which translates to roughly $235 is a great place to start with the Poco X3 NFC. When it comes to the first con on my list for this phone, I would have to give that to the software. Now, to be clear, there's nothing inherently wrong with the MIUI 12, which is loaded on this phone. And actually, Xiaomi's done a really good job to westernize Android so that it's more user-friendly for those who are typically used to things like an app drawer as opposed to dumping all of your apps on the home screen as standard MIUI does on its Chinese variant. But that being said, it is extremely heavy when compared to other versions of Android, even things like Samsung's One UI. When you take a look at the system settings and even some of the customizations that you get, you do get a lot of customizations, but Xiaomi's mixed around so many things within the software. But if you're used to using Android from any other Android manufacturer, it will take a little bit of a learning curve to get up to speed here. Now, while the software on this phone may not be up to my standards, the performance that it offers definitely is. This is running the new Qualcomm Snapdragon 732G, which is a slight improvement over the chipset inside of the Pixel 4a, which just launched a couple weeks back. This was running the Snapdragon 730 versus the 732G. Now, as far as performance goes, it's roughly 5 to 10% improvement across the board, and it can definitely be felt as you're navigating the UI, even though this phone has a custom skin on top of Android and the Pixel 4a is pretty much running stock. The performance can also be seen in gaming as well, where this phone can max out frame rates and give you an incredibly smooth gaming experience on games like Call of Duty Mobile and even PUBG, while the Pixel 4a can play them, just not at the maximum frame rates. As for the second con on my list, I would give that to the design of the Poco X3 NFC. The build of this phone is polycarbonate on the back, a metal frame on the sides, with an embedded fingerprint sensor, if you can see that right there, into the power button, which is a nice touch not having it on the back, but that means you don't get an in-display fingerprint sensor, and then Gorilla Glass 5 on the front. Now, it is functional, but unfortunately it feels really cheap, feeling like it is a €200 smartphone when there are some devices within the category that feel a lot better than this. And then there's the design itself with this textured stripe right down the middle of the phone, and then of course that large Poco logo, which you can't miss. Now, I'm not a huge fan of brands putting their logo this big on the back of the device, but if it's done right, it does look good. Unfortunately, I don't think that this is done right. Now, the next pro on my list definitely has to be the display. You're looking at a 6.63-inch Full HD Plus display panel with a 120 Hz refresh rate. And Poco's even gone one step further, adding a 240 Hz touch sampling rate in order to ensure that your touch interface isn't lagging at all. Now, we have seen 120 hertz refresh rates on smartphones that cost about 400 euro. So this is actually the very first time, or at least the very first display that I've used in a smartphone this cheap, a display that's this great with such an amazing refresh rate. Honestly, using this is so much better than any other smartphone within the category. Next up in the pros column definitely has to be the quad camera setup on the back and the front-facing camera on this phone as well. Now, while there are 4 sensors here, the last two, a 2 megapixel macro and 2 megapixel depth sensor, are really throwaway sensors just to say that you have a quad camera setup. But the main 64 megapixel sensor and 13 megapixel ultra wide camera actually take really decent photos. You also get 4K video out of both of those at 30 FPS, and it performs great in daylight and nighttime shots as well. As for the front-facing camera, you're looking at a 20 megapixel sensor up front that is capable of recording 1080p video at 30 FPS. The results aren't stellar, but again, for the price point of this phone, you definitely can't go wrong with this. Now, I don't have any more cons to talk about, but I've only had the phone for 48 hours, so I might come up with some before my full review is out. So I'm going to finish things off with a couple more pros on this device. The next one is the battery life here. You get a 5,160 milliamp hour battery, which is even large when compared to other devices within the category, even though mid-range devices and budget-friendly devices typically have pretty large batteries. This can get you at least 2 days on a single charge. I have not charged it yet since taking it out of the box, and some people might even be able to go 3 days if they want to push it just a little bit. But that brings us into the next pro, and that's going to be fast charging. Now, in a lot of devices, you do get 18 watt fast charging, mainly Motorola and some of the other competitors within the category. But Poco has given this phone 33 watt fast charging. To put this into context, it's even faster than what you get on flagship devices like Samsung's Galaxy S20 series and even the Note 20 series that came out this year. Poco says that you can charge the phone from 0 to 50% in 30 minutes and all the way to 100% in 65. I have not tested that yet since I haven't needed to charge it, but I'm definitely going to be putting that to the test once I do. Lastly, I'm going to close things out with the audio on this device and also the haptic feedback. The vibration motor inside of this thing feels like it's from a smartphone that cost 600 euro or more. It's definitely not something that you typically see on a smartphone at this price point. And the same goes for the stereo speakers. You get a speaker up front and at the bottom as well. And again, not something that you typically see within the mid-range or the budget category. And then lastly, in conjunction with the audio, is the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. Now, we do see this a lot on mid-range devices when we've not seen this in flagship devices, but it's nice to have when you have all of these other features in combination on a smartphone that costs just 200 euro. And that's going to do it for a quick look at the Poco X3 NFC and the pros and cons of this device. Now, after using it 48 hours, I will say there is a lot to like about this smartphone, but we are still working on our full review and additional camera comparisons as well to see how this phone stacks up to the competition. If you want to see how that turns out, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon as well if you want a notification as soon as our videos are online. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.